Okay, so I'm going to get started. I am Katie Crowther. I'm here at Clarkston campus and I teach English. And my presentation today is on giving targeted feedback on student writing. And I just want to preface this by saying that this is a work in progress for me because I am working on this as a sort of scholarly teaching project. It came out of some conversations with other English professors about how much time we spend grading and how arduous and tedious it can be because of the way we grade. And I think that most of the time we have a certain idea about what grading or assessing writing is supposed to look like. And especially as an English teacher, I sometimes can have up to 500 essays a semester to grade. It becomes actually feasibly impossible to grade in the way that we usually grade and to give feedback that we know is being effective for the students. So along with a couple of other professors, Lauren Curtwright and Jennifer Kolatoski, I've been developing a more focused way of giving feedback, and that's what I want to talk about today. So I would assume that regardless of discipline, most of us use student writing as a way to meet certain learning outcomes. And whether we assign a long or short writing assignment, we need to evaluate it in a way that is helpful to the student, but it can be completed in a reasonable amount of time for us and that we know is going to be effective in meeting those learning outcomes. So many of us default to what is effectively copy editing when we grade a student's paper. We get on there and we start fixing all the mistakes and adding our own comments that are content-based suggestions. And we feel, especially as English professors, but I know many other disciplines too, we feel that we have to correct everything. And this is not only time-consuming, but it is not helpful to the students. Ultimately, you are not teaching them what they need to do better. You're just showing them that you know how to do it better. And imagine this analogy. You are an art professor and your students paint a picture for an assignment, and then they turn it in to you to assess, and you paint over it, showing them how it should have been done. So essentially you have not helped the student learn how to better meet the objectives, but you've rather actually obliterated their original work and shown them how you know how to do it better. And that's essentially what we do when we go through a student's paper and fix all the mistakes. What we need to remember is that we're not editors striving to develop a perfect piece. We are teaching students process. We're teaching them how to learn how to write. So in my endeavor to find a more effective way to give feedback on student papers, I did a little bit of research. And many of my findings were pretty obvious. We would probably guess that students don't often read feedback. They look at a paper that is covered in marking and they get overwhelmed, and maybe they read the first few. And even if they do read them all, they are oftentimes overwhelmed with not knowing where to start in terms of how to improve their writing. They see all their mistakes, but they don't really know what it is they're supposed to fix and how to go about fixing them. Another thing that came out of my research is that feedback needs to fit the rhetorical situation. It must be communicated in a way that students can best receive it. So we need to be concise, but we also need to use language and diction that the students are going to be receptive to so that they are going to receive it and not feel overly discouraged, but rather encouraged to take action. And so that's my last point, is that feedback should inspire action, not just correct mistakes. So as we're thinking about how can we give productive feedback, we have to think about what is the goal of feedback. So feedback should clearly relate to learning objectives. We should not just simply give a writing assignment for the sake of that, just the simple writing, but we should rather think about how we're asking students to perform certain tasks. And so our feedback should help direct students towards those objectives so they can understand how they are meeting them or not meeting them. The other things that the feedback should do, they should be focused, meaning specific, and they should be actionable, that students can actually learn from them and take some action to improve their future writing, or if it's a more content-based writing assignment, so they can actually work towards better mastering the content. So before you begin grading, you should ask yourself, what are the three, and I'm using 3 as a rough number here, you could have more or less. Ask yourself, what are the 3 most important objectives of this assignment? How can I make sure the student is working to meet those objectives? So just for an example, you might say that the 3 objectives are displaying comprehension of a content-based learning target. You want them to prove they've learned something, but also clear organization of ideas and correct grammar and spelling. So those could be your 3 targets. So now you have to find a way to communicate the feedback to the students so they can understand whether they met those objectives, and if they didn't, how they could better meet them in the future, in a future writing assignment, or how they can immediately get some help on a content-based objective. So there's several options really. The 3 that I tend to use would be a rubric, specific sentences targeting the areas the student needs to work on, and recorded feedback, which I really like because when you record feedback, you can speak to the student as if they were sitting in front of you. You can use the kind of language and diction that allows the student to hear the critique without feeling discouraged or upset, and you can really actually give them a sense of the feedback you would give them one-to-one. So I've got here a couple of examples. This is a rubric, and I know it's too small to read, but just to give you a sense of the layout, it's a rubric from an essay. And I have many of the criteria, and what I do is I highlight the specific ones I want the student to work on. And at the end of the document, if you can see, it says plan for revision, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. And the student is responsible for identifying the main objectives that I've highlighted and see what the problem was in the paper, and then set a goal for how to work on that for the next paper. Now, in my instance, there will be a next paper because it's a writing class, and so they have something directly to apply it to. But if this is an isolated writing assignment without any follow-up or revision, you can set goals that are more related to mastery of content. I also have here a quick screenshot of how you can record feedback in iCollege. You can do this in iCollege or in turnitin.com, and it's very easy to attach this feedback to the assignment, and it only allows you to record for a minute, so it actually forces you to be very focused and specific in your feedback. So as you are writing, what you should do is resist the urge to correct everything. You can write on the draft if you want to, or record as you go along. But remember that you're not editing the paper. That is not your job. Jot down some notes to help you target the feedback. And then after you've read, give the student targeted feedback. Be sure to praise some of the strengths and actually note that the goals that they did achieve, the learning objectives that they did meet. And then identify the areas or issues to work on. And again, I'm using number 3 here, but you can use more or less. Give the students 3 action items to work on. These could include, for example, if we're using the 3 objectives I named earlier, one with content-based, so you could point them towards a chapter in the textbook or an online resource for a content-based problem. So they could go find the answer in a particular resource. For the organization issue, you could suggest a reverse outline for an organization issue, so that's a specific writing strategy. And for grammar and spelling or mechanical issues, you could provide them with a link to a grammar website that has a worksheet on one particular grammar issue. And here I would not overwhelm them with asking them to fix every grammar issue. I would specifically target 1 or 2 that you see as particularly important or particularly problematic. And then what's important is you provide a follow-up mechanism. Now, for papers that could be possibly revised, or if you have sequential writing assignments, you can have the students target their goals, and then when they turn in the next writing assignment, you can ask them to show in a short note attached to the paper how they have targeted those goals for their follow-up paper. If you are not having a sequential writing assignment, you could simply have them give you a short piece of writing or even an oral report where they talk to you about what they've done to follow up on those target objectives. And as students progress, one thing I'd like to note is that you can give them more freedom with revision as they improve as writers. So rather than you identifying their targets, you can ask them to look through the paper and see your comments and allow them to identify the 3 main areas they need to work on. And that allows them to develop as a writer, because ultimately you want them to be able to find their own issues and know how to work on them. So you can see here that I have a target issues worksheet. Sometimes I give this to students in class. Sometimes I give it to them one-on-one if we have a meeting. I like to do this for longer papers. And it allows them to see what their target issues are. And at the end of the worksheet, they make a plan for revision and identify their target areas. and they're responsible for turning that into me at some point for me to see what their actionable items were and how they have worked on those. Remember always that the tone of your feedback should be friendly and helpful rather than terse or corrective. You're suggesting options and possibilities rather than pointing out all of the mistakes and errors. And finally, I'd like to say that this is certainly adaptable to smaller writing assignments. I use this for blogs, and I just give one piece of actionable feedback, so you can certainly do that as well. You can use more for longer papers and just one or two, and you can have standard ones you use frequently as well if that's helpful for grading lots of assignments. And also, if you don't like the idea of not correcting all of the errors, some people just can't stand to not have all of the grammar and spelling errors corrected, you can certainly require that the student run it through Grammarly, which is a software that we have access to, or even in Turnitin.com, there is a grammar checker called eRater that you can turn on, and you can mandate that your students use that in addition to the feedback that you get. And that's all. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions if you have any.
No, great. I've taken a few notes here. I think I'll give the recorded feedback a try. I've considered it before, and I teach English as well, by the way. But
oh, great.
I thought about the recorded feedback, but you just sort of encouraged me to give it a try, so I'll probably try that.
Students really seem to like it. I have to show them, really walk them through how to go access it, but they do seem to like it. I think that it allows you to have, a tone and, affect that they can feel comfortable with, and I think they're more receptive to it. So if you want a longer recording time, iCollege has a minute, but Turnitin has 3 minutes if you use Turnitin.
Okay, great.
So feel free to email me if you have any questions.
I was about to say I've been editing longer than I've been teaching, so
yeah.
I'd be reversing some habits here.
It's hard.
I definitely appreciate that.
Great, yeah. Great. Well, thanks for listening, and feel free to email if you have any follow-up questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Have a good day, guys.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.